Welcome to This Podcast is Making Me Thirsty. This is episode 37. This is the place to be for Seinfeld fans. We all know Seinfeld's the greatest sitcom of all time, and it's purely because of everyone involved. Guest stars, obviously the main four, the writers, the production team, which leads us to today's guest. She was the costume supervisor on Seinfeld from 93 to 98, seasons 5 through seasons 9. She was involved with making the characters look great and dressing them and all the puffy shirt, the sniffing accountant sweater. We'll get to all it, the Gortex jacket. I mean, you name it, she had a hand in it. One of the reasons why the show was so great, and we're really excited to talk to her today. Stephanie Kennedy, welcome.
Thanks, guys. Hi, nice to meet you.
We are so excited to have you here, Steph. So how did it all come about? I mean, costume design, right? Like, how did you become a costume designer?
Oh, wow.
And then how did you come to this hit show, season 5, right, 1993? Tell us a little bit about your background and how the whole opportunity came about.
It's funny because now that I started this, Seinfeld Backstage page, people are asking me questions. So I've had to think about this because sometimes things in life just happen and you don't really think about how it all happened. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So my dad was in the business. So I grew up in the business. He was a film editor and he did big comedies. So he did Mr. Mom, he did Airplane.
Oh, wow.
And so I grew up, just hanging out at the studios, hanging out in the cutting room. I always say I grew up on the cutting room floor, and I had my own splicing little machine, and I knew how to run turn the wheels and the film cans and the old school way. Anyway, so that was just a world that I was familiar with. Also, I liked clothes, so I just kind of put those two things together, and yada yada, And I live in LA. I grew up in LA, and so you have a lot of opportunities to kind of work in commercials, or if you can hustle a bit, and use contacts, or get your foot in the door. My dad didn't help me get any jobs, but once I could get my foot in the door with a contact or two, you have to work to kind of you have to work hard to keep it there.
So how that
go to school or anything for that. I didn't go to costume design school or anything like that, or film school or anything. I'm sure it's harder now, maybe, but now that actually I was thinking, now that there's so many indie, so many different ways to make movies, and people, you could make a movie and put it on YouTube, or make a movie, now there's so many outlets for things. It used to just be, in the 90s, it was network TV and movies in the movie theaters.
So did you 1993, right?
Yeah.
Was it like an interview process? Like, did you have to meet Larry and Jerry? Like, can you tell us how that actually came about?
I met Jerry. I was doing commercials, and that's how far I had made it. I was doing commercials and like magazines and commercials and smaller stuff, really. And I met Jerry on an American Express commercial.
Huh.
And he had his own person. He had Charmaine Simmons, who is the Seinfeld costume designer. She was there just to do his suits and do his stuff. And then I got hired to do the other people, like the background people and the people that he was interacting with in the commercials. So so the three of us met, and when you do commercials, you're kind of, you're on the set a long time, you're on the set all day, and there's a lot of downtime when they're setting up the next shot. So I got to know them pretty well. And I think her right-hand person was leaving to go do a movie. And so by the end of this whole, week of doing some Amex commercials, they took me aside and just wanted to have another meeting with me. And that's kind of how it started. So they saw me work, and they saw how hard I worked with them on the American Express commercials. And then they offered me a job. It was great.
Wow. So you is it safe to assume you were a fan of the show at that point before getting hired, or
Yeah.
I mean, it was 4 seasons in, wasn't quite at it was basically hitting its peak in our mind. Season 3 is one of the best, but
Yeah.
by season 4 and 5, it was just about to hit its peak. So I'm assuming you were a fan, or
It's funny, you're the first person that's asked me that question since I started the Seinfeld, my Seinfeld Backstage. I wasn't a huge, I mean, I used to see Jerry around. It's funny, I used to see him around like at Jerry's Deli, or I'd see him at California Pizza Kitchen. I used to see him around before he had the show, like around
Right.
LA, like having a meal here and there. And I liked him because I'd seen him on Carson. And so I really, really liked him, his comedy. I thought he was really special, and I still do. And I really enjoyed, his kind of sensibility. I thought it was like super fresh and funny. And I love comedy because I kind of grew up with comedy. But I wasn't a huge TV person, and so I'd seen the show, and I knew it was getting really, I knew it was getting really popular and everything. So I was really, really grateful and happy and excited to work on it. But I was also a little bit terrified because I'd never done a huge show like that. Okay, I had worked on a show. I'd worked on Golden Girls and Empty Nest. So I did work as a day, like a helper, because, I would come on the days that they were filming and work backstage. But I didn't shop for the show. I had nothing to do. I would work in the costume department, wardrobe department, but I didn't have anything to do with selecting any wardrobe or anything like that. I worked directly with the actors, helping them get dressed and everything. Like I dressed B. Arthur for some of her episodes. But
I was always a Blanche guy.
you were, you might be a Blanche guy. You look like a Blanche guy. But I didn't have any experience like shopping for a sitcom and the kind of pacing. I mean, commercials are pretty fast, but the pacing that a sitcom show like Seinfeld with shooting a show a week is a hectic schedule. And it was just Charmaine and me. And, honestly, she lassoed me in, and we hit the ground running day one. And we were, we
Yeah, I mean,
hard.
you came in at season 5, and just going through some of those episodes, they threw you right into the fire, if you will, especially for, what your duties were. I mean, you had to find the puffy shirt. You had to, the glasses that I don't know if you did this, but the glasses, the women's frames, or the sniffing accountant sweater. And we'll get to all this, but I'm just kind of getting, setting the stage that you came into a machine, it sounds like, and you were kind of thrown into it as far as like, and they were rocking and rolling by season 5 for sure.
Definitely. Well, we hit the ground running with the mango. That was season 1.
Yes,
I mean,
George's
season
yellow shirt matched the yellow of the mango, right?
Right. Yes. Did you ask me about that shirt? About the
No.
mango colored shirt?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that's why it was a mango colored shirt, right? To kind of tie it in.
I watched that show recently just to kind of, I'm watching them again to kind of refresh my memory so I can have some answers for some of these questions.
Right.
And I don't even know if that was subconscious or intentional. That those guys never gave us, very rarely, and it was a specific item like the puppy shirt or the puppy jacket. They didn't give us like a lot of input, like you have to put them in this or that. They had, writing to do and other things that they were working on. So they kind of trusted us to kind of get the right thing. I think that's a coincidence. I really don't think that was intentional. A mango colored shirt for
Because he reuses that shirt. He uses the yellow shirt quite often.
Yeah, there's a lot of a couple of reuses.
So speaking of the mango, Stephanie, we're having a little fun here. We're gonna pull up some photos.
Okay.
We just want to get your unfiltered like reaction to it, like and thought process behind some of these. It's not going to be the obvious one.
Yeah, maybe an
like the
anecdote
puppy
or
shirt,
something.
things like that. But let me know if you guys can see my screen. Can you see it?
Yeah.
All right.
Jerry's
So
Queens College t-shirt.
this is your first episode, right?
Oh yeah.
So what do you think about this scene right here and these outfits?
It's so good.
I love the
First of
belt.
all, yeah.
That's my question. Queens College, did he
Jerry
want
went
that
there,
or?
yeah.
Okay, so he
Yeah.
went there.
Yeah,
Right.
he went there, yeah.
So he wanted that. And
He did,
they sent us a box of gear because they loved him and they were so excited, and so they sent us a box of gear, and I think we had a hoodie for him and a pullover you'll see in another episode, and that short sleeve t-shirt, and I'm sure they sent us, caps and socks and whatever other gear they made. But they were so excited and happy to put for us to put some of that stuff on TV. and he was all too happy to wear it. That was really nice.
And those,
And
yeah,
then George, I mean, here's the thing. Okay, so when I started in season 5, all 4 of them, the main cast members, were already established. So they had a closet full of clothes when I started. I mean, I didn't get there and, I have to fill a closet. And so I'm sure some of these episodes, they were just wearing stuff that they had in their closet. They had closets just like you and I have closets, and we reused clothes just like we wear clothes over again. So, I mean, you'll see, I mean, for example, like George's, some of his coats and all of their outerwear, you'll see again and again, because
they
that's,
had.
that's how people
Yeah.
live. And it would be weird if every episode they were wearing like brand new clothes, because that's not who these people are. They're not out buying, brand new clothes every week.
It's funny you mentioned that. I think I'm going to go to the next one. This is obviously a famous sweater, and
Yeah.
this was you. But what's interesting, this was used. I'm sure you know this, right?
Yeah.
On a different character in a season prior, right?
Yes. It's really
Yeah,
weird.
the boyfriend,
also,
right? The
that-
Mrs.
okay,
Sokol's
that-
daughter.
Yeah.
It's really weird because when I started, and this is like, I mean, we're going back ways, right? This is 30 years ago almost. Right? But that we had a section for Jerry, section for Jason, section for, or a section for Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer. We had a section for them in the main wardrobe room. And then we had this like just these spare clothes that were just like up for grabs. Like if we were doing a fitting, we needed something for somebody, or if an extra came in and we needed, and they were wearing like bright red and we needed to put them in something more subdued. So this was on when I started. This sweater was in that rack, that line of extra clothing. So it's really funny. I didn't know anything about having used that sweater ever previously on Seinfeld. So when that got used on Michael, which is so perfect for the sniffing accountant, right?
Right.
Mohair, right?
Yeah, I think it was one of those. I think it was one of those situations where we're, like I said, we were putting together a show a week, an episode a week. That means your main cast members plus any other guest stars. You've never seen these people before in your life, usually, unless it's like Estelle or something, or Newman. But you're seeing them for the first time, and so you're dressing them like this guy, that's next to Kramer. I forgot his name, Barry something. Like we're dressing him in a suit. I mean, sometimes if there's days and nights, like you're putting together like several outfits per character, and in addition to your main cast members. So my point is, I think Charmaine grabbed that sweater off out of the kind of like the pile of clothes that we just had laying around in the wardrobe room and put it on him. I mean, honestly, like it's such a recognizable piece that it's one of those things. I'm really surprised that it got used again. I'm glad it did, because it's perfect for him, and he rocked it. That scene is hilarious. I remember everybody was like trying not to laugh out loud while we were filming it. But it's funny because like I said, it's so recognizable. It would be like wearing the puffy shirt in another episode and nobody noticing it. It's like, of course it's so recognizable. So that's a complete mystery to me.
And this is just, you mentioned like this is the Briss, if you remember.
Yeah.
And he wears multiple jackets in this episode. I guess that's just everyday life. You got like, did you think about that?
Okay, so I would have to look at that episode, but if they're days and if they're different days and nights, we changed them for the different days and nights. I mean, if they're going from like morning into evening and we saw them later that night, they would be in the same thing. They should be, unless they're going to a party or going to, if they're going somewhere where they needed to change. But that's how it worked. I mean, we kept them in the same change if we could. If it was another day and night or another day, then they would be changed. But hopefully, I don't know if anybody's ever caught any mistakes we made, because I know for a fact, like later on, like season 8 or something, when we were getting like, when things were kind of, season 7 and 8 and 9, we had a lot more of a budget. They gave us a bigger budget in the wardrobe office, to be honest, and we hired more people to help us out. And we had somebody, I dressed Jerry and Julia, and Charmaine dressed Michael. And we had a gal named Elaine actually that dressed Jason. And for one episode, she put him in the wrong outfit. And we filmed the episode in front of a live audience. And everybody was starting to go home. And I'm looking at the wardrobe, I'm looking at the continuity book, like the stuff we'd already established from filming. And I looked and I said, holy, SHIT. I said, oh no, we just had him in the wrong outfit. It's not going to match. When they go to edit, it's not going to match. And so I had to make a decision, like, am I going to get like, yelled at now or really, really yelled at later? Right. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing where, before they go to edit it in a couple of weeks and that set is already broken down and other actors like guests are on other shows, you have to fix it right then and there. So I ran to our director, and anyway, that's a longer story, but I ran to our director. I said, we have to reshoot that scene. And so we had to bring everybody back in. Like, they were just like going to dressing rooms and stuff like that but it was one of those things where it could have been a really, really big mistake. So I don't know if there are any other instances that we accidentally put them in the wrong clothes. If any fans have ever caught that, but I'd like to know. maybe I don't like to know, but it'd be kind of interesting. Oh yeah, here we go. Bizarro.
Yeah, this is the Bizarro. So
yeah,
having to dress like the main people, but in that Bizarro world, that's interesting. I mean, you could definitely see the Jerry. All of them have the same aesthetic almost, but they're slightly off.
Exactly. So that was, again, another example of how, we would get a script, on I believe like on a Thursday or something, and we would start rehearsing it, Thursday afternoon, Friday, and, they would start filming, so maybe some pre-shooting on a Monday, Tuesday, and we'd film it with an audience on a Wednesday. So we didn't have very much time to put these shows together, basically. And, so we got the Bizarro Jerry episode, and luckily I had some comic book kind of, background knowledge and Dave Mandel, we talked about it, and knew what they were looking for. But yeah, we'd have to go out and get all the stuff for people. And it was a lot. If we had a pretty good sized guest cast, it was a lot of work. And if they had a big guest cast and then several days and nights that the episode went into, several days and nights, you might have seriously like 20 to 30 costume changes for everybody. It's a lot.
I can imagine.
All right. How about this one from our
Yes.
our one of our favorites, Peter Melman?
Yay! Yes, I'm glad that you are showing me this. Okay, so I'm not sure which question you want me to answer.
I don't know. Just go.
A lot of questions. First of all, I got to say,
Laura,
I love all their outfits
Malora
in this one.
And it was my job to so that's Malora Walters, who's phenomenal. I love her so much. And we had to put, I don't know if you're familiar with any of this, it's kind of one of these wardrobe tricks, but they're like these little pasties, these little like, they're nude color. They come in different shades of color, and they're what girls might wear under a sheer top if they don't want to wear a bra. So it's like tape almost, and you put it over your nipples so that you don't see a different color. So we put it over Malora. She was so cool too, and she's she went with everything. So I mean, you're still seeing her bare chest and everything, but you're not seeing everything, right? You're still seeing like the shape of everything. I mean, Jerry is and Julia is and Michael is. They're seeing pretty much everything, but you're just not seing. She has like a tape, like almost like a Band-Aid, but a large Band-Aid over both of her breasts there. So and not only do they get to see it, but all the crew members, the camera guys, the grips, the lighting, everybody's getting to see So she arrives onto the set. Of course, we'd have a robe over her. We're not making her wander around the set looking like that, but she would walk into the set and we'd take her robe off, right? And then she would, do that scene. But she wasn't, she was just a pro and not nervous at all and not shy. So that was a lot of fun. And
Classic
actually,
scene.
and I've watched that episode recently, and if you look, she turns for a second. There's a
You can see
moment.
it.
Yeah,
There's a moment.
we've noticed.
We are aware.
We are aware.
Yeah.
I
So-
love all the outfits in this one. They're very beach-like. Elaine's dress, even. I mean, Jerry's casual shirt. It's very. I love this scene.
And like George's tight shirt when he's sitting down. Like, I mean, you nailed everything in this.
Yeah.
Did you like?
Swimsuit.
We know you're working with Melman. We don't want to hear about that a little bit later. But were there favorite writers like that? Like you just like clung to more because of things like this, or
Okay, so
did it not matter?
I'm supposed to say no. I'm supposed to say I love them all the same. I know that, and there are episodes from each and every one that are my favorites. Let's put it that way. Like I have favorite Max and Tom episodes. I have favorite Larry Charles episodes. I have favorite Alec and Jeff episodes, and David and Spike episodes, and Carol episodes. But Peter Melman, I have a soft spot in my heart for Peter's episodes and for Larry David's episodes. And the reason, as a wardrobe person, they would tend to write smaller episodes about just like a smaller idea. So they would write episodes that might have just, like the dinner party, for example, took place in one short span of time. They didn't change once. So for a wardrobe person, that's a dream. That's a dream. Is they're in one change the whole time.
And that's the Gore-Tex jacket, which had to be, just to touch on that first. I mean, that's the Gore-Tex jacket, which is iconic at this point. Like, was that jacket as is? Like, was that how the jacket was made, or did you obviously padded it up, I'm assuming, or like, how did that work? I think you said you padded it up, right?
Yeah, we got that jacket off the rack from a discount ski joint here in LA, and I brought back a few for Jason to try on, and that was the winner. And we opened up the side seams of that jacket and we shoved batting. We just puffed it up more.
Yeah.
We puffed it up. And then, Jason did a lot of it. Was acting too, right? Because, I've mentioned this, I think even on my page, but you could go too far with something like that. Like we didn't want it to be, it was ridiculous enough. We didn't want it to be so ridiculous, like that. Right. We want it to be believable. That jacket might have existed somewhere, and honestly, in real life, there is a limit to how much you can puff it up. It's like a bike tire. Like you could really, we could have puffed it so much it would explode, really, or rip the seams, the thread. So we puffed it up by opening up on the sides and just shoving a lot, like 10 bags of fill in the sides, right? And then having it sewn. We had our own seamstress, and she sewed the sides up very carefully. And, the rest was just him, him working with it. Yeah.
So like,
this is an incredible George outfit, by the way. Right?
Unbelievable.
One of the greatest George outfits of all time.
I look at these pictures. I just laugh.
Yeah, that's the other thing is the humor. Like it's funny just looking at it and what it's supposed to be, obviously. Yeah. But yeah, go ahead, O'Hara.
But Stephanie, like you said you got the script, right? Whether it's George in this ridiculous sweatpant outfit or the puffy jacket, like. Does Larry or Jerry, I know they're like heavily involved, obviously. Do you have to run it by them? Like were you scared to bring a jacket that puffy or even the puffy shirt or outfits like this? Do they have to green light everything, or you kind of had?
That's a great question. If it was something that a wardrobe, specific item like that they wrote, if it was just an outfit like this one you're showing me for George, they, that may not have gotten, they didn't have they were, like I said, we were doing a show a week. I mean, Larry and Jerry didn't have a lot of time to be like micromanaging the wardrobe department for everybody's individual outfits. They didn't do that at all. But for something like a puppy shirt or puppy jacket, or for, another item that's scripted like that, for sure. That would be a conversation, or maybe even a meeting. Like they'd come into the wardrobe office and we'd chat about it, and they'd tell us what they were looking for.
Like this outfit is so funny. Like,
yeah, it's amazing. Blue Nikes. I love the blue Nikes.
You have to be like Sammy. You have to be funny. Like you have to know this. Like,
well, but
right?
also it's
and to find Kramer's basketball outfits.
And pretty much anything in pretty much anything in George's row of clothes was funny because he was wearing it, and because this is just these sometimes just putting together stuff like out of his closet, which just kind of was fun, because that was something that we'd already, I promise you, that shirt that I'm looking at right now that you're showing me was a shirt that we'd already established in a previous episode, and that he probably wore the sweatpants in a previous episode, and we're just putting them together. So this is like, just like you and your friends, that not you guys, but you probably have friends that dress like this possibly, or your, relatives or something, and they just put stuff together. They don't even think about what they're wearing. And so you see it together like this and it looks ridiculous, Okay. Yeah.
All right. Tony's big on this, on the shift.
The shift on Elaine here. So you kind of overlapped the Elaine shift, which also kind of coincided with Tom Sharon's and Andy Ackerman, switch as well after season 5. You were there for both. This is what we like to refer to as cutesy Elaine. O'Hara likes to use that term with the dresses and the poof, and then it switched to more of cool Elaine with the leather jacket and a little more hip, if you will. Was that a conscious? Was it Elaine changed character, so now you have to change your wardrobe, or was it like the other way around, chicken before the egg? I don't know. We're just trying to get an idea. Was Julie involved in this? Was it a tone of the show overall coming down from the top, or was it just kind of organic? I don't know. Just kind of touch on a little bit.
So when I came on, obviously she looked like she was very like cutesy Elaine, and all 4 of them, like I said, had been established, their style, and Jerry was really dressing like Jerry, basically. I mean, even though he did have Jerry clothing that he changed into, we had Jerry wardrobe, that he would change into, and and George was George. So the fun part for me, I think, for working on this show was to really, really work with Julia, and because her character was getting was changing jobs, working for Mr. Pitt, working for Jay Peterman, gave me an opportunity to change her up organically. I mean, that just worked with what was happening with her character.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. And so I just thought, it wasn't like a conscious decision on my part or Charmaine's part. It wasn't like, let's change her look, because Jerry was very, very, he was very clear about making sure none of them changed. Like, he didn't want their style to change. He wanted episodes from the early days to be aired back to back with episodes, from the last episode, the last season. So he was really clear. He didn't want their characters to look trendy or dated. He was very clear about that. So, there was a fine line with Julia, like how much we could, go and change her. And also they were becoming more and more famous. By the time when I got there in season 5, they were being exposed to more, expensive. Not that they weren't wearing expensive clothes before, but just personally their styles were changing. Their styles were changing, and they were being exposed to more. And Julia has a great style on her own. And I just thought, I liked this new kind of look for her, a little more monochromatic, a little more sleek, a little bit more sophisticated, but still, it's not like we just did a complete, update on her wardrobe. Like, we still kept feminine pieces, floral pieces. It's not like Elaine totally changed her style, but we, it was an evolution for sure.
Yeah, it wasn't as drastic as we thought, but
yeah,
So that shifts.
This is amazing. This is amazing.
I mean, like we talk about the four main characters, but this had to be a hoot, right?
I mean,
Dressing these guys.
wouldn't you just watch the show? Wouldn't you just want to watch the show of
This should be the show
them?
right here. This should have been the show.
I mean, I loved these guys. I loved working with these four so much, and they were so dear. And so it was like having your family. It's like having a family reunion every time they were written. Like we would actually cheer, like when we would read it, when we get a new script and they were in it. It was like, yay, we get to see them again. Because they didn't live, I mean, Jerry Stiller had to fly in from New York. I think Barney Martin might have too. I'm not sure if Liz lived out here or not, but Estelle lived out here. Anyway, so we loved seeing them. And yes, that was always a lot of fun. And so these characters, we had a closet for them as well. So we had clothes that we had established on them. Like you might see Estelle or Frank or, Jerry's parents in some of the same clothes now and again. But, because we did have some things for them that we established, but we shopped for them as well and brought things in. Yeah, I mean, their stuff was a lot of fun, and you could just, I mean, look at Jerry Stiller in a visor. I mean, there's nothing better than that. That's about as good as it gets. And okay, and so Jerry Stiller, for example, that was my first character that I established, because the four main cast members had already been established. I came on in season 5, and Jerry Stiller started in season 5. And so I was sent out to pull his stuff together. It was like, hey, go get stuff for Jerry Stiller for his fitting. And I went out and had to, pull a rack of clothing together for him to wear. And so that was really terrifying. And, I was really, really worried about it, actually, and I'd never met him before, and he was going to be flying in the next day. And I think, I mentioned this, before on my page, but I being the new kid, I wanted to nail it, because, I wanted to prove myself. And also you want to make sure that, you don't want to make a mistake with an actor, and you don't want them to think that you don't understand who their character is. So you don't want to bring in a rack of clothes and they try it all on and it doesn't fit, or it's not quite the right style for them, or they don't get it. Like, you want them to put it on and feel like the character. And Jerry loved everything I brought in, and we got along great right away. And I loved this man, and it was, and then, and then we added more things as he worked more. But, we put together like 3 or 4, little outfits for him, costume changes for him, our first fitting, and everything, pretty much everything worked, and he loved it.
Steph, did you all right, you did all the costume, but were you there like every day, like interacting with them and like watching the actual performances?
So we would all get a script, and we'd have a table read, and the wardrobe people would be there for the table read, because it was really important for us to hear, especially with guest actors, how they were reading the character, because that gave you a little bit of information about what they should be wearing, and that was also for Charmaine and me, that would be the first time that we would meet these people in person. So we would get a script, and our scripts would have the guest actors' phone numbers and their agents' numbers and stuff like that. So we would call them and say, hey, when you come to the table read, would you bring a couple of things that maybe bring a few things from home? Because sometimes, sometimes we would want to throw in, something of their own for various reasons. Maybe, maybe they wore something to the casting that Larry and Jerry liked. So just bring a few things of your own that you think might work. I mean, for Jackie Childs, we outfitted him from top to bottom. I mean, no doubt about it. That was a blast, because, we all knew who this guy was, because we were all glued to our TV watching OJ. I mean, we all watched it every day and talked about it on the set during that whole year. And so, we were just like everybody that was around during those days, like we were obsessed with with what was going on, with what we were seeing. And that was such an LA, for me, growing up in LA, I lived down the street from like where Nicole Brown had been murdered. And it was like, we were just, the whole thing was just so surreal. And so anyway, we were so familiar with these, with Robert Kardashian and
Right.
with Johnny Cochran and everybody. And so, of course we didn't copy what Johnny Cochran, was wearing exactly, but we did, borrow kind of his, some kind of style from him for sure.
I mean, those ties.
The ties are incredible.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Money.
I mean, yeah. And Phil, I mean, by the way, Phil Morris, can we just talk about Phil Morris for one
Yeah.
second? I mean, he just like, just,
Nailed it.
just nailed it, right? Just hit it way out of the park. I mean, everybody was just on the set whenever he was back. We were all just in tears, like laughing. It just amazing.
Yeah, I would say the secondary characters from when you joined, whether it's the Costanzas or Jackie Childs and even Newman, like I think really elevated the show in the later years for sure. So speaking of that, what about our friend Newman? If he wasn't wearing the mailman outfit.
Yeah, I mean, he was a lot of fun to dress too. And what a great, I mean, I loved Wayne Knight, he's such a sweetheart. But I didn't have any experience really shopping in the big man stores. So that was new for me, I'd kind of come from like high fashion, like the commercials I'd done before I met Jerry were all like Mercedes Benz and these kind of, really huge budgets, and we're dressing all these models. And so I didn't really have experience, shopping in where real people shop, that much. I shopped in like these fancy places. And so it was really, really great for me to, get to know some of these big and tall men's stores, which cater to these guys and have sizes that like you've never heard of, like size shoes that are, because we live in LA, you need stores like this because we've got so many ball players too that are big guys, right? So it was fun also because I would sometimes bump into Shaq or bump into some of the Lakers or bump into some, ball players. And so that was a lot of fun too. So I love shopping for Newman.
Well, it's funny you mentioned like LA, and obviously the show is set in New York, right? Like, did Jerry and Larry have like, did they talk to you about that? Like, there's a certain New York look they want, or again, I think they just kind of gave you carte blanche.
Yeah, I mean, again, by the time I started the show, it already had kind of a look, it already had kind of a vibe. And Charmaine was from New York, so she knew. And that was one thing. I mean, I would go to New York and buy coats because you can't really get good coats, New York coats out here. Like people just don't wear them, and they sit on the racks out here in LA stores because we just don't have that kind of weather. And so I would really have to go back east to get the right kinds of outerwear for our cast. But yeah.
From the classic.
This is the last one we're showing, but one of my favorites.
This is
Unbelievable
fun.
George here too.
I love all these pictures you're showing me. Yeah. And yeah, so that jacket, that coat of Kramer's, that's like a signature piece, right?
Yeah.
That coat, this is sad because that coat was a rental. So when I started the show, that was like we would start the season every year by going to the rental houses and picking up, rent things that we had rented for them. Obviously, Jerry, we didn't have any rentals, and Jason, no. But Julia, we had a couple vintage pieces, like a brown leather jacket that everybody loves. And then Michael, we had shirts and coats that were vintage that we had rented from rental houses in Hollywood. So this is not even a jacket that we got to keep at the end of Seinfeld. This is a jacket that went back into stock at some rental place. I know, it should be in a museum.
It really should. You had touched on it a couple of times. And speaking of pictures, you had mentioned your page, your Instagram account, the at Seinfeld Backstage is everyone should be following that, whether you're a Seinfeld fan or not, but especially if you're a Seinfeld fan, it's incredible. Were you taking those pictures as a someone who just wanted the memories, or were you taking them for work? Like you needed them to do certain things with, you know, seeing how people looked in the outfits? Is a combination of both? You know, I mean, I don't know. Are you planning on putting together as a book maybe or something? I think maybe, I don't know. It's just really cool that you have all those pictures. Like just curious how it started and that sort of thing.
So the wardrobe girls or guys, sometimes, you know, wardrobe could be men and is often men and women, but in our case, we just had women working in our department. But our job was to take pictures for continuity.
Oh yeah. Okay.
To make sure, right? So if we're shooting on New York Street and then the next day we're shooting in on the set inside, and it's the same, you know, because we shoot out of order, right? Take
Mm-hmm.
the different scenes sometimes. If we do exteriors or we do any pre-shooting, it's out of order. So we take pictures just so we can match. And really, because it was the 90s, the wardrobe gals were the only people on the set with cameras. And I was just, you know, so aware of the fact that, you know, gosh, if we were filming Seinfeld now, we would, you know, everybody has a camera like in their hand, right? Everybody has an
Right.
iPhone or whatever, a phone, and we'd be taking pictures all the time. And because we were the only people really taking pictures, these continuity pictures, these are the only these little snapshots are like these little treasures, right? So the pictures I have are the one-offs or the mistakes or the bloopers or maybe the duplicates
Mm.
of the main picture. So the main pictures for continuity went to Castle Rock at the
Got
end
it.
of each episode, And just in case we'd have to reshoot a scene, we would have that Bible, we called it, to refer to for the costumes. So these photos that I'm posting on my Instagram were my own that were in my desk at the end of season 9.
Wow.
And or some snapshots, you know, then you might see like there's, you know, sometimes we take a Polaroid just for fun, you know, like little selfies and stuff before selfies, but we take some pictures just for fun.
But
Very cool.
what I'd say is what Castle Rock doesn't have is the backstory to everything, and that's why I think your handle is just amazing, and it stands out from just pictures, right? Because you're telling stories,
Yeah, you
and
write the
that
stories exactly.
no one else has.
Well, yeah,
So
because the wardrobe girls, we have all we see everybody in their underwear. We have all the we see everybody in their socks.
save that for the book, you know. So we're New Yorkers here, so we're always curious about the Yankee stuff. Like, how did that work? Just like contractually, did Major League Baseball get involved? Was logos allowed? Were the uniforms really cotton?
So when they wrote that, you know, when that storyline began with George working for the Yankees, that would be a production issue, like a question for the production office. Like we had, like Susie Greenberg was one of our producers. I would imagine she would probably be the one that would be, you know, making all those decisions and negotiating or talking with the Yankees and, you know, any kinds of legal things. They would have hammered that out upstairs, you know, way before Charmaine and I, you know, got access to any uniforms or anything. They would have to clear all of that. So, you know, by the time, you know, they wrote that script and everything, they'd already, you know, had made some kind of deal with the Yankees to use their uniforms. And so they sent us stuff. They actually sent us real stuff. I believe we had some stuff made, but I mean, you know, that stuff existed, like Yankee gear and Yankee t-shirts and Yankee hats and all that kind of, you know, logo stuff. They just gave it to us because, you know, now we're writing, we have George Steinbrenner coming to visit. You know, I got to dress, you know, Derek Jeter. I mean, that was super fun, and find out like what hotel he was staying in. I'm like, I'm chatting with him backstage. That was super fun too. But, you know, we got to meet the players and we got to, you know, work with the actual stuff. They sent us that stuff.
So to touch on that, the Jeter stuff, maybe not specifically Jeter, but you've mentioned you were backstage, you got to see everything. Without saying anything you can't say, any funny anecdote or anything like that comes to mind that you could share with us, whether it's with
Okay, I'm
one of
super
them.
careful.
I
Yeah,
know,
I'm
I
super careful
understand. Just something
because
funny or,
there is,
an
yeah,
offhand.
there is, I mean, you can imagine, I mean, when you're in a dressing room with, an actor, there is a level of
Or on
trust,
set
right?
even. Yeah.
Because, and also you're in their private space. Like if you're going into their dressing room, if they're on the phone or if they have a friend there with them or they're half dressed or whatever, it's like, obviously, it's not like even hair and makeup that's a very kind of intimate kind of job to have as well. But dressing someone, you're touching them as well, like you're helping them with their buttons, you're helping them like with their belt, you're measuring their inseam. I mean, that's about as close as you can get, so,
Sure.
right? So any kind of
I
backstage
just meant like
thing.
on set sort of stuff that happened that was funny
Yeah, well,
bloopers and things like
I
that.
do want to say, some actors don't like to be touched, and so that I would find out very quickly. Like when you were doing a fitting, like you'd find out like the actors because they just send us actors, and they used a lot of New York actors. They'd fly them out. They would have somebody in mind. They'd write stuff with certain people in mind. And so they'd fly some of these comedians and stuff, and they're not used to having somebody like right in their face like that. They don't want people, it feels like an invasion, you know.
Sure.
And so sometimes you'd be surprised, you go to go to touch somebody's shirt collar, and they would be,
I
hey,
I could see Fred Stoller doing that. That's my guess,
oh
but
God, yeah, Fred.
so Stephanie, we don't want to keep it too
Yeah,
much
we don't
longer,
keep it too
but
long.
what else are you up to these days? I know you're doing something with Peter Melman, correct? Can you share a little bit on that?
I do a lot of things with Peter Malman.
Oh,
He's one of our favorites.
We just had dinner the other night. I
he picks up the tab, I hope, right?
He does. Yeah. So I always pick the most expensive places. And
Yeah.
I always make sure I don't eat anything all day. So I arrive extremely hungry, so hungry. And then I order a second meal to take home with me. No. Okay. So what am I? I am home. I actually have three boys here, and I'm a single mother. So I'm at home with 3 teenagers that
You got
eat
your hands full.
nonstop. So my job at the moment is just feeding hungry boys and dressing them, and they dress themselves, but that's so I'm home right now, but I have a couple creative projects, and we'll talk about that. You'll be hearing about those too. But
We're
yeah, I have a
excited.
project with Peter. I have a project with Peter and some other creative projects. But as soon as this quarantine is over and I can send these kids back to school, I can pick up, I can pick up on my projects, and you'll hear about them.
Very cool. I don't know if you have time for one more, but I was just curious. You said you didn't really have a background in art or costume design or anything like that, but when you watch these episodes, the way the dressing of each character in the shades and the tones and the colors, it looks to me like it's purposeful and it looks great aesthetically. Like there's always, if someone's wearing a dark green, someone else is wearing like a purple, then there's another dark green in the background, and then like that has to be a conscious decision, right, on your part, to make everything look as pleasing to the eye as it does, as to not distract the viewer, maybe, or something like that. I was just curious. I always notice it whenever I'm watching the show, how well they're set up.
Well, I think that most shows and films and so forth, you look at the sets. Like we would make sure, of course, we knew at Jerry's apartment and Monk's, those were our permanent sets. But if they're bringing in other sets, we would actually walk out there, like Charmaine and I would go out there while they're building them or painting them or whatever, to see what the colors were. And so, and when we put our racks of clothes together, we would actually we would make sure that, and it would happen sometimes that Jerry and George were both in green, or Elaine and, sometimes they would both be in the same color, which would make us crazy. But we tried not to do that. So we tried to keep the colors separate. We tried to keep them each kind of in their own world. Like we tried to keep George with pattern with the plaids. And we tried to keep Michael had his own thing with the Kramer shirts, but we tried to kind of keep everybody in their own lane as much as we could. I hope that answers your question.
It does.
As far as the colors, I mean, we didn't have time to get into a whole psychological, really but we did, and Jerry for sure looks good and looks better, I should say. He looks good in like most things, but he looked better in certain colors. I thought like jewel tones and darker tones. And I think, nobody really mentions this either, or nobody's asked me this, but people mention how Julia kind of evolved. I think Jerry's style evolved as well. And if you look at the episodes more closely, I think you'll see that because
it's sophisticated a little bit more, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of got him untucked. I think I'll go down in history as the girl that untucked him, if that sounds right. But, he doesn't look as tucked in, like his shirts aren't as tucked in. He looked more relaxed. And I think I started layering him more because I thought it was more, it looked better on him. I thought it was more, attractive. So
funny, you mentioned the tuck, non-tuck.
Yeah.
That reference happens a lot on the show, but Jerry, when he goes under the gas with Bryan Cranston, Elaine asks him, where you tucked? He goes, I don't know. Sometimes I tuck, sometimes I don't. So that's, that made me think about it.
Yeah. Also, like just how Jerry liked to dress personally too. Like so things, like I said, like things kind of evolved, just organically as well. And especially for someone like Jerry that was playing himself, he really, if he evolved personally, like his character would evolve also, like style wise,
So it sounds like, I mean, your relationship with Jerry, it seems really tight. Have you talked to, have you had the opportunity to maybe work on Curb with Larry or?
No, I haven't because I was doing,
Well, I know you're busy.
Well, but and honestly, I had my first. I was pregnant season 9. And my due date was our last show night. That was my actual due date was like whatever that was, like April 10th or something like that. And so I think that's when we filmed our last the finale show was April 10th, and that was my due date. And so I tried to make it for that, and so nobody hired me. I mean, I think Max and Tom asked me to work on a pilot, a couple times. And I was just way too busy with like a toddler. And that just wasn't something that I was, and also I knew what it took. I mean, doing costuming, like you're there early to set up rooms, to set up the wardrobe, and then you're there late at night. And so I just didn't see how that could work for me. But, yeah, I mean, a lot of our crew went on to work on Curb, the writers anyway. And a lot of our crew went on to work on like old Christine, and they went on to work on Michael's show. And they did other things. They really tried to keep our little Seinfeld family together, which was really nice.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, like, I think the puffy shirt, all that stuff gets a ton of credit, but I just love the simplicity that you brought to the show. And like kind of the pictures we went through, just like, what can I tell you? Like, we still laugh to this day. So just thank you.
Great.
Should take a lot of credit for that.
Thank you for having me. It was really a lot of fun.
This was awesome.
Yes,
so much. We really appreciate it. Tell Peter we said hi.
I will definitely. All right. Bye, guys.
Thanks again. Thank you, Steph. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye, you too.